So it's also like that. I think this personality type in general is, for me, very triggering and very beguiling in a non-attractive way.
Mhm.
Hello.
Hello. I just expect people to hide things.
Yeah, I think this is why I've in the past been in relationships with people that a lot of other people would be like, oh, that person's kind of a dick, kind of an asshole.
Mm.
Because generally they're not hiding that much.
That's true.
Because they're like coming out and saying it, so you're like, oh, that was mean or whatever it is, but at least it's at least I know what it is.
Yeah, most people don't go like, I'm gonna hide. I'm gonna hide in plain sight. Like, I'm gonna be terrible to everyone. So maybe that's bully mentality. I don't know. Maybe people do that too. Like, I'm gonna be an asshole so no one knows my true feelings, my true tender heart.
I mean, which isn't to say that you can be inauthentic and be a dick. I just mean like,
Yeah.
I err towards people who are socially clunky rather than
like that.
facile.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. You know, like I think about. I don't know if I shouldn't talk about people on this. I think I would actually be uncomfortable with someone who was that honest. Or I always think there's like something secret. I really do. I don't quite buy people at their surface level. I'm always like, hey, yeah, but look what's underneath that.
Really?
Yeah, and I can get
regardless of the person?
Yeah, like regardless of the person. The person could be like deeply unhappy and depressed. And I'd be like, yeah, but what's all this about?
Yeah, I think that there are certainly people like that, but usually I get some kind of read of inauthenticity. With people who are hiding.
Mm. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe that's more about me.
That you think everyone is hiding?
Yeah, maybe I'm just projecting. Like, so I'm putting up like a little bit of face, a little bit of a show. And so I just assume that the other person is too. And then for you too, if you're like, yeah, I expect everyone to be honest.
Which goes back to this idea of like, are all people gooey inside? This type of thing.
Right.
Like, yeah, I fully assumed they were. I don't think they are. I think maybe not. Which isn't to say that there's nothing gooey.
Like there's a capacity for it, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's really there. It could be like,
or how well it's functioning.
Right.
Like it could be shelved. It could be in a closet. It could be tucked somewhere.
For some reason, I'm thinking of Angels in America right now.
Is this conversation extremely vague?
Probably.
Okay.
I mean, I hope so.
Yeah. Just people.
Just people being honest versus lying about things that do or do not matter. About the GUI Center, for whatever reason, I'm thinking about Nathan Lane in Angels in America.
I don't think I saw the TV.
It was like the Andrew Garfield version that I saw. You've seen the play, right?
Yeah, I know, but I know the character.
You know the character.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm thinking of him.
Who?
The character.
Joe.
Thank you. I'm thinking of that character. Where it's like, yeah, is there something like gooey and center? Like gooey on the inside? Or like, no, is he an asshole?
And I think probably like the question is the problematic part, as it always is. Like I think it's a like I always think in these situations that it's a false premise.
Oh yeah.
And like, so what is the point of assessing whether or not? What are you trying to get out of the assessment of whether or not someone has a GUI center?
That's a good question. Why do I do that?
Because like, what are the intents and purposes?
I mean, it obviously makes the world a less scary place if I do that. I go, oh, really? Everyone just feels rainbows and kittens deep inside. Then, like, people are a little bit less harmless. But yeah, you can get into trouble with that. It's kind of like an idealistic view into the world. Not really giving people enough credit to do terrible things. This is like conceiving of how someone commits murder. Like, yeah, how does that even happen? Yeah, because coming from the place where like everyone is essentially good, yeah, how does that happen?
I feel so nearsighted, considering our job is to like understand people. I'm like, I don't understand almost anyone.
I remember talking to this one actor who was like I only want to play villains.
Because?
He was just like, no, they're the most fun.
Yeah, it is fun.
They're the most fun. But it kind of like, the conversation kind of ended there. But even that is such an interesting conversation because it's like, that's not like, oh, because they're like deeply compelling or complicated or da-da-da. It's like, no, they're having fun.
It might be that, or it might be like having the opportunity to act out things you can never act out in your life.
Yeah, he's like, I get to be nasty. I get to like yell at people.
And there's no like consequences.
Yeah, I don't care what people think about me. I get to just be.
Oh, weird day. Weird day.
Yeah.
How was yours?
It was okay. I felt like it started really late, but it's not really true, actually. It felt like summer.
I thought there was an intruder in the backyard.
Did you?
Yeah. And then I realized it was you.
Oh, shit.
And I realized that the reason I was surprised is because I haven't seen you back there in 700 years.
She never goes back there. Yeah, there was something about, like, you know that feeling of summer when school's out and, like, days have a different time quality? It felt like that.
That's what I moved here for.
Yeah.
That feeling is literally what I moved to LA for.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
That was it. Yeah.
It makes it feel like work isn't work. Like I did a bunch of stuff outside today and I didn't even notice it as being effortful. I wasn't like, oh, I have to go do this thing. That's going to be pain in the ass.
Yeah, no. You were just jamming out.
Yeah. I was singing painfully loudly outside.
It's great.
It's quarantine, motherfuckers.
I was thinking of that. I was like, everyone gets a concert right now. Okay.
I also danced up a storm outside at 10, and I'm pretty sure Jason saw me, and I don't know how I feel about that. My neighbor.
How do you feel about it?
Hmm?
Do you care? I always feel like you're just...
I only care in specific, like,
You're like, yeah, I'm
tiny
good.
slices of certain contexts.
Mhm.
For example, there's no music because I had my headphones on.
Yeah.
So that seems weird to me. I don't want to be seen dancing without music. I don't know. There's just like the weirdness of there's like context lacking. I don't know.
Yeah.
The fact that he's missing information is like makes me be like, oh, what does he think I'm doing? And
I mean, if you have headphones on, like, he can probably put it together that you're listening to music.
I know, but it's like how people actually sound in the shower. Do they really sound better in the shower? A lot of times when you're not in the shower and someone's singing in the shower, you realize that they don't sound better in the shower.
Yeah.
They just feel better about it in the shower.
They feel better about it and they can't hear themselves.
You can hear yourself.
No, but isn't there something about the shower that, like, literally it's like because of the water that it distorts sound?
I don't know.
Or do you think that it creates just like a safety cocoon?
I think that's a big part of it.
Yeah.
The safety cocoon. And I also think that the fact that there's so much noise makes you think that your noise is not that loud. So it gives you cover. But when someone's outside, they're not hearing the shower the same way you are. So it's like listening to someone sing to a track in their ears.
Yeah.
It's kind of weird. Also, the class that I took is just like, it's quite, not suggestive, but like, yeah, I guess it's suggestive. So I was like, great, I'm doing extremely suggestive movement, like at 100% commitment with no music. It's kind of weird at 10 in the morning. It's his fault that they built up the thing now so that like he just has to stand there and can see into it.
I know. You know what? I've never seen him do anything embarrassing, and that makes me feel bad for him.
You've never seen him do anything embarrassing?
No. But I never really fully look him in the eye. I don't know why I'm afraid of him.
Why?
I don't know.
I know you just said you didn't know, but
yeah. Whenever I've done yoga out there, I've kind of felt awkward about it.
totally. But it's mostly gotten bad since they built up the driveway.
Yeah, definitely.
Because there was some like semblance of separation before. Like you'd have to make an effort to look into the backyard. And now he just has to be there, living his life. And it's like, oh, hello. That's weird.
Yeah, you would think with all his renovations, he would have built the wall.
That's a project of his that he seemed to be very passionate about, but I've seen no progress.
Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah. I know he doesn't like it. He has said that he feels like a tool.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he's like, I'm kind of just like, oh, and I'm in your backyard.
Yeah. On the bright side, those what are they called again? The plants out front have grown like crazy. So the front of the house is very sheltered and secluded.
Yeah, as long as I dance in the plants.
Yes, there you go. I mean, that is something.
What is?
That's covered.
Yes. It's working.
Yes. Yes.
Should we do-
I just want to say, I think good for you for dancing in the backyard. Because where else are you going to dance? It was like the first nice day in forever. We're all stuck at home. Yeah. You gotta.
That's part of my thinking. I was like, I can't go to class, so now you have to deal with me, Jason.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm sure you're not the only one. I'm sure like lots of people are doing that kind of thing.
It's also kind of funny when we were like back there oming.
Yeah.
And he was like fucking standing right there. I was like,
yeah.
It made me think like, oh, he gets this like funny insight into like what we do all day because
Right.
it's all become visible to him.
Yeah.
Because it's all happening here. I was like, yeah, these are the kind of classes I go to, I guess. Now you know.
But it's LA.
Totally. Totally. He hasn't asked me about Rosie. I find that quite strange. Maybe people know not to ask.
Maybe they're like, oh, I don't know. I would ask.
I don't know if I would. Because if you thought about it for a second, you might be like, oh, there's no way this is good news. Whatever it is.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Mayhaps.
Anyway.
So that's, I don't know. That's everything, I guess. That's our day. That's our Tuesday.
Yeah, we're missing major chunks, but yeah.
Yeah. Last night, what did we read?
Balashev.
That's right. Who I was trying to remember his exact position. Is he a general or an adjutant?
Oh, he's a general.
Okay, he is.
Adjutant just means like administrative person.
Okay.
It's not a position. It's
He's
not
a
like
general.
a rank.
It seemed funny that a general would be a messenger, but then I guess it was more than just a message.
Yeah, he's like, I mean, as you discovered when he started to make shit up, he's like the voice of the emperor in the room.
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, yeah, just go this way. Oh, just get behind the river. Like you had one job, Balashev. Communicate the message. But it got intense because I think he was empowered to like negotiate with. He seemed empowered to negotiate with Napoleon, which obviously was not very effective. Because Napoleon just sliced and diced him.
That's got to be a tough job, negotiating with Napoleon.
Yeah. Napoleonic negotiation. Napoleonic negotiation.
And his legs. Yeah, like he sounds like a pit bull.
Yeah. Sounds like he has emotional problems. And
maybe.
Yeah. See, maybe that's what happens when you repress a bunch of stuff.
It sounds like that, yeah.
You end up being Napoleon.
Maybe. But then sometimes I think like, no, repression doesn't do that. Sometimes like letting it out too much does that. Like I don't think Napoleon's repressed.
But his cough. But his left cough. What is it doing if he's not repressed?
I don't know what's happening with it. And like also that his calf like was a good indicator. Like
he's like, see this?
This means I'm on to something. The scent is fresh. I don't know. I don't know what's going on there. Yeah, that's pretty much all we read, right?
Yeah.
It was just that.
There was no appearance of any familiar characters.
Yeah.
It's like we're in a different book.
Kind of.
It's like as the comet of 1812 was going by, we just jumped on and are now living life on the comet.
Yeah. Life on the comet.
I have a food thing outside, apparently.
Oh, what did you order?
Anxiety ordered a burger.
I forgot that such things exist.
Burgers?
I realized that lately I've pretty much been eating the same thing every day.
Don't you do that anyway?
But like I forgot about like
That was a little bit
Asian
of a
food.
Canadian about. You did?
Yeah.
I can never forget about Asian food. It's not possible.
Yeah. It's like, oh yeah, those flavors. Right.
Oh, the Silk Road.
Yeah. So I'm like, oh, a burger. Interesting.
Yep. Impossible. I would like to buy a hamburger. I would like to buy an impossible hamburger.
Impossible.
I wonder if the gosling is hatched. The Gentle Barn. It has a live stream of a freaking egg they found and put it in an incubator, and they have a camera on the egg, and it's gonna hatch sometime, as eggs are wont to do, and I'm pretty excited about it.
And then there's gonna be a terrifying looking creature that cracks out of it.
A gosling.
A gosling. I learned this yesterday that baby goose is called a gosling.
What an unlikely thing for you to learn.
Right?
Yeah.
I should know this. What a cute name. A gosling?
Yeah, it's super cute. Like duckling. We call baby animals very sweet things.
Rightfully so. But then groups of animals, very scary things.
They're not all scary.
No, they're probably not. Everyone just remembers like the murder of crows.
That's the
What
that's the
a
one people always go
terrifying-
to.
What a terrifying name. Wait, groups?
I don't know. I'm sort of desensitized to murder.
But like crows are scary.
Yes. Oh my gosh, Ishan has the funniest impression of crows. It sounds nothing like them, of course. It's like the equivalent. It's like the Arrested Development chicken joke.
No, all of these are terrifying, by the way. But continue.
Yeah.
Yeah, what are we
Ishan was talking crow to some crows,
saying?
and he was using an alternate dialect. It was like, oi, 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 oi. I was like, how is he? Is that what he's hearing, or is that the best he can approximate what he's hearing?
I do
Oi,
not
oi,
know.
oi, oi,
Oi,
oi.
oi, oi. Maybe that's what it. I don't know.
It's
Like
really funny.
he can do a ka sound though, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. No, these are scary.
Did
like
you look up scary?
apes, a shrewdness.
People are just
Shrewdness
like
of apes.
someone did that literally just for this reaction.
Probably. Bats, there's a lot, but it's either a colony, a cloud, or a camp.
Okay.
Okay, all right. Bees, a swarm. Okay,
That's funny that you read that one.
why?
I don't think it was one of the.
Buffalo, a gang, or obstinacy.
Oh, fuck you.
Obstinacy. Cats, I've never heard of this. A clouder or a glaring? A glaring of cats.
Why do they just assign rude words to all of these things? Obstinacy? What?
Obstinacy. Yeah. Oh, wildcats is a destruction.
Someone's making this up.
I don't know.
Someone's making this up. I mean, obviously someone is, but some particular someone is making this up.
A group of foxes is called a skulk.
Rude.
They
don't skulk.
A skulk of foxes.
Why do foxes and wolves get such a bad rap?
Jellyfish is a smack. And lemurs is a conspiracy.
You know what? These people are bothering me. Someone got high.
Yeah, who decided
on their
this?
way through the English language and was like, wait, we can just call stuff.
Gross. Moles is a labor of moles.
I like that one.
That's cute. Porcupines is a prickle. A prickle of porcupines. Really? Ravens is an unkindness. I'm literally starting to think this is.
Where is this? What is the source of
This
this?
is grammar.yourdictionary.com.
Damn it. It sounds fairly legit.
Sounds okay. A zeal of zebras. A shiver of sharks. A scurry of squirrels.
I feel like this is getting made up.
A fever of stingrays.
No one has ever said that.
An ambush or streak of tigers. A knot of toads.
Ew! Ew! K-N-O-T.
I'm not of them.
I'm not a fan of toads.
I knew this one actually. A leap of leopards.
Yeah.
That's great. And a pandemonium of parrots.
Oh, I thought it was going to be pandas.
A crash of rhinoceros.
I was just wondering what rhinos were.
A crash.
That's a good one.
It is good.
I'm warming up to these people.
Okay.
But we have been reading them for half an hour.
I know. I know this is what everyone tuned in for. Yeah. Oh, what do you think giraffes is?
Block.
A tower.
So obvious.
A bloat of hippopotami.
Rude.
A bloat of them. Okay. Shall we read? Or should we wait for your food?
It's outside, so should I bring it in?
Sure, if you want.
What a stupid thing to order and then not eat immediately.
Yeah, actually.
Damn it.
Here, I'm going to start.
Please.
Okay. So we're at Book 9, Chapter 7. After all that Napoleon had said to him, those bursts of anger and the last dryly spoken words, "I will detain you no longer, General. You shall receive my letter," Balashev felt convinced that Napoleon would not wish to see him and would even avoid another meeting with him, an insulted envoy, especially as he had witnessed his unseemly anger. But to his surprise, Balashev received, through Duroc, an invitation to dine with the emperor that day. Bessières, Calincourt, and Berthier were present at that dinner. You know, those guys. Those French, that French gang.
Who in the damn hell are they?
Napoleon met Balashev cheerfully and amiably. He not only showed no sign of constraint or self-reproach on account of his outburst that morning, but on the contrary, tried to reassure Balashev. It was evident that he had long been convinced that it was impossible for him to make a mistake, and that in his perception, whatever he did was right, not because it harmonized with any idea of right and wrong, but because he did it. The emperor was in very good spirits after his ride through Vilna, where crowds of people had rapturously greeted and followed him. From all the windows of the streets through which he rode, rugs, flags, and his monogram were displayed, and the Polish ladies, welcoming him, waved their handkerchiefs to him. At dinner, having placed Balashev beside him, Napoleon not only treated him amiably, but behaved as if Balashev were one of his own courtiers, one of those who sympathized with his plans and ought to rejoice at his success. In the course of conversation, he mentioned Moscow and questioned Balashev about the Russian capital, not merely as an interested traveler asks about a new city he intends to visit, but as if convinced that Balashev, as a Russian, must be flattered by his curiosity. How many inhabitants are there in Moscow? How many houses? Is it true that Moscow is called Holy Moscow? How many churches are there in Moscow? He asked. And receiving the reply that there were more than 200 churches, he remarked, "Why such a quantity of churches? The Russians are very devout."
A quantity of churches.
Yes, exactly. "The Russians are very devout," replied Balashev. But a large number of monasteries and churches is always a sign of the backwardness of a people, said Napoleon, turning to Caulaincourt for appreciation of this remark. Balashev respectfully ventured to disagree with the French emperor. Every country has its own character, said he. But nowhere in Europe is there anything like that, said Napoleon. I beg your Majesty's pardon, returned Balashev. Besides Russia, there is Spain, where there are also many churches and monasteries. Let me know when you find it. This reply of Balashev's, which hinted at the recent defeats of the French in Spain, was much appreciated when he related it at Alexander's court, but it was not much appreciated at Napoleon's dinner, where it passed unnoticed.
The uninterested and perplexed faces of the marshals showed that they were puzzled as to what Balashev's tone suggested. If there is a point, we don't see it, or it is not at all witty, their expressions seemed to say. So little was his rejoinder appreciated that Napoleon did not notice it at all, and naively asked Balashev through what towns the direct road from there to Moscow passed. Balashev, who was on the alert all through the dinner, replied that just as all roads lead to Rome, so all roads lead to Moscow. There were many roads, and among them the road through Poltava, which Charles XII chose. Balashev involuntarily flushed with pleasure at the aptitude of this reply, but hardly had he uttered the word Poltava before Caulaincourt, who's that?
You know, Caulaincourt. Caulaincourt.
Caulaincourt.
Yeah.
It's quite an impressive name.
It is.
I like it. Began speaking of the badness of the road from Petersburg to Moscow and of his Petersburg reminiscences.
Well, sorry, I was looking him up.
Oh.
But all I got was a region in France.
Caulaincourt.
After dinner, they went to drink coffee in Napoleon's study, which 4 days previously had been that of the Emperor Alexander. Napoleon sat down, toying with his Sèvres coffee cup, and motioned Balashev to a chair beside him.
Napoleon was in that well-known after-dinner mood, which, more than any reasoned cause, makes a man contented with himself and disposed to consider everyone his friend. It seemed to him that he was surrounded by men who adored him, and he felt convinced that after his dinner, Balashev too was his friend and worshipper. Napoleon turned to him with a pleasant, though slightly ironic smile.
They tell me this is the room the Emperor Alexander occupied. Strange, isn't it, General? He said, evidently not doubting that his remark would be agreeable to his hearers, since it went to prove his, Napoleon's, superiority to Alexander.
Balashev made no reply and bowed his head in silence.
Yes. 4 days ago, in this room, Vincent and Stein were deliberating, continued Napoleon with the same derisive and self-confident smile. What I can't understand, he went on, is that the Emperor Alexander has surrounded himself with my personal enemies that I do not understand. Has he not thought that I may do the same? And he turned inquiringly to Balashev, and evidently this thought turned him back on the track of his morning's anger, which was still fresh in him.
And let him know that I will do so, said Napoleon, rising and pushing his cup away with his hand. I'll drive all his Württemberg, Baden, I don't know how to say that one, and Weimar relations out of Germany. Yes, I'll drive them out. Let him prepare an asylum for them in Russia.
Balashev bowed his head with an air indicating that he would like to make his bow and leave, and only listened.
He bowed in a way that made it clear that he wanted to bow.
And only listened because he could not help hearing what was said to him. Napoleon did not notice this expression. He treated Balashev not as an envoy from his enemy, but as a man now fully devoted to him, and who must rejoice at his former master's humiliation.
And why has the Emperor Alexander taken command of the armies? What is the good of that? War is my profession, but his business is to reign and not to command armies. Why has he taken on himself such a responsibility?
Again, Napoleon brought out his snuff box, paced several times up and down the room in silence, and then suddenly and unexpectedly went up to Balashev, with a slight smile, as confidently, quickly, and simply as if he were doing something not merely important but pleasing to Balashev. He raised his hand to the 40-year-old Russian general's face and, taking him by the ear, pulled it gently, smiling with his lips only.
What the fuck? To have one's ear pulled by the emperor was considered the greatest honor and mark of favor at the French court.
It's like It's like the Paul handshake from Great British Bake Off.
I don't know what that is.
Paul Hollywood.
What about it?
It's just like if he likes your baking, he shakes your hand.
Does he?
Yeah, and
I
it's
don't
like,
know.
oh, what do I do with this now? And it's the same thing with Napoleon.
Certainly.
You never wash your ear again. Well, a door and courtier
That
of
shouldn't be a problem.
I just thought of that. They don't wash their no. Only for balls.
Balls. Yeah.
Yeah,
Like
well,
a
yeah,
party.
yeah.
Party time.
Not for anyway. Well, adorer and courtier of the Emperor Alexander, why don't you say anything? Said he, as if it was ridiculous in his presence to be the adorer and courtier of anyone but himself, Napoleon.
Yes, we get it.
Yeah. Are the horses ready for the general? He added, with a slight inclination of his head in reply to Balashev's bow. Let him have mine. He has a long way to go.
The letter taken by Balashev was the last Napoleon sent to Alexander. Every detail of the interview was communicated to the Russian monarch, and the war began. Oh, wow! 52% of the way into the book.
Oh!
Whoa!
You could say, like,
It
we're more than
has
halfway.
begun.
What has begun? The
Whoa.
war? Finally?
Mhm.
Uh-oh. I mean, sure. This war.
I mean, sure.
This war. I don't know what
This
war.
is a war. Yeah.
A war. I don't
Yeah.
understand this war so far. That has seen so like sporadic battles, and then everyone just goes home and.
This is a proliferation of wars. I'm just going to start naming groups. This is a bucket of wars.
Chapter 8. After his interview with Pierre in Moscow, Prince Andrew went to Petersburg on business, as he told his family, but really to meet Anatole Kuragin, whom he felt it necessary to encounter.
Uh-oh.
On reaching Petersburg, he inquired for Kuragin, but the latter had already left the city.
Mm-hmm.
Pierre had warned his brother-in-law that Prince Andrew was on his track. Anatole Kuragin promptly obtained an appointment from the Minister of War and went to join the army in Moldavia. While in Petersburg, Prince Andrew met Kutuzov, his former commander, who was always well disposed towards him. And Kutuzov suggested that he should accompany him to the army in Moldavia, to which the old general had been appointed commander-in-chief. So Prince Andrew, having received an appointment on the headquarters staff, left for Turkey.
Prince Andrew did not think it proper to write and challenge Kuragin. He thought that if he challenged him without some fresh cause, it might compromise the young Countess Rostova, and so he wanted to meet Kuragin personally in order to find a fresh pretext for a duel. But he again failed to meet Kuragin in Turkey. For soon after Prince Andrew arrived, the latter returned to Russia. In a new country, amid new conditions, Prince Andrew found life easier to bear. After his betrothed had broken faith with him, which he felt the more acutely the more he tried to conceal its effects, the surroundings in which he had been happy became trying to him, and the freedom and independence he had once prized so highly was still more so. Not only could he no longer think the thoughts that had first come to him as he lay gazing at the sky on the field of Austerlitz, and had later enlarged upon with Pierre, and which had filled his solitude at Bogucharovo and then in Switzerland and Rome, but he even dreaded to recall them, and the bright and boundless horizons they had revealed. Oh. He was now concerned only with the nearest practical matters unrelated to his past interests, and he seized on these the more eagerly the more those past interests were closed to him. It was as if that lofty, infinite canopy of heaven that had once towered above him had suddenly turned into a low, solid vault that weighed him down, in which all was clear but nothing eternal or mysterious.
Of the activities that presented themselves to him, army service was the simplest and most familiar. As a general on duty on Kutuzov's staff, he applied himself to business with zeal and perseverance. To business. Sorry, my eyes went cross-eyed, I guess.
It happens.
It
You've read
happens.
thousands of pages
Yeah.
out loud, so
Right. And these screens, the screen, that blue light.
I can't believe you haven't switched to your
I know,
remarkable
what?
yet.
I just keep forgetting.
You must not think of War and Peace throughout your day.
He applied himself to business with zeal and perseverance, and surprised Kutuzov by his willingness and accuracy in work. Not having found Kuragin in Turkey, Prince Andrew did not think it necessary to rush back to Russia after him. But all the same, he knew that however long it might be before he met Kuragin, despite his contempt for him and despite all the proofs he deduced to convince himself that it was not worth stooping to a conflict with him, he knew that when he did meet him, he would not be able to resist calling him out, any more than a ravenous man can help snatching at food. And the consciousness that the insult was not yet avenged, that his rancor was still unspent, weighed on his heart and poisoned the artificial tranquility which he managed to obtain in Turkey by means of restless, plodding, and rather vainglorious and ambitious activity.
In the year of 1812, when news of the war with Napoleon reached Bucharest, where Kutuzov had been living for 2 months, passing his days and nights with a Wallachian woman, Prince Andrew asked Kutuzov to transfer him to the Western Army. Kutuzov, who was already weary of Bolkonsky's activity, which seemed to reproach his own idleness, very readily let him go and gave him a mission to Barclay de Tolly?
Yeah?
Tolly.
Barclay de Tolly.
Tolly!
Before joining the Western Army, which was then in May encamped at Drissa, Prince Andrew visited Bald Hills, which was directly on his way, being only 2 miles off the Smolensk high road. During the last 3 years, there had been so many changes in his life, he had thought, felt, and seen so much, having traveled both in the east and the west, that on reaching Bald Hills, it struck him as strange and unexpected to find the way of life there unchanged, and still the same in every detail. He entered through the gates with their stone pillars and drove up the avenue leading to the house as if he were entering an enchanted sleeping castle. The same old stateliness, the same cleanliness, the same stillness reigned there, and inside there was the same furniture, the same walls, sounds, and smells, and the same timid faces, only somewhat older. Princess Mary was still the same timid, plain maiden, getting on in years, uselessly and joylessly passing the best years of her life in fear and constant suffering.
Cool.
Mademoiselle Bourrienne was the same coquettish, self-satisfied girl, enjoying every moment of her existence and full of joyous hopes for the future. She had merely become more self-confident, Prince Andrew thought. De Sales, the tutor he had brought from Switzerland, was wearing a coat of Russian cut and talking broken Russian to the servants, but was still the same narrowly intelligent, conscientious, and pedantic preceptor. The old prince had changed in appearance only by the loss of a tooth, which left a noticeable gap on one side of his mouth. In character, he was the same as ever, only showing still more irritability and skepticism as to what was happening in the world. Little Nicholas alone had changed. Oh yeah, I always forget he has a son.
So was he.
Yeah. He had grown, become rosier, had curly dark hair, and when merry and laughing, quite unconsciously lifted the upper lip of his pretty little mouth, just as the little princess used to do.
Wow.
I just wouldn't even do that. He alone did not obey the law of immutability in the enchanted sleeping castle. But though eternally all remained as of old, the inner relations of all these people had changed since Prince Andrew had seen them last. The household was divided into 2 alien and hostile camps, who changed their habits for his sake and only met because he was there. To the one camp belonged the old prince, Mademoiselle Bourrienne, and the architect. To the other, Princess Mary, De Sales, little Nicholas, and all the old nurses and maids.
During his stay at Bald Hills, all the family dined together, but they were ill at ease, and Prince Andrew felt that he was a visitor for whose sake an exception was being made and that his presence made them all feel awkward. Involuntarily feeling this at dinner on the first day, he was taciturn, and the old prince, noticing this, also became morosely dumb and retired to his apartments directly after dinner. The evening, when Prince Andrew went to him, and, trying to rouse him, began to tell him of the young Count Kamensky's campaign, the old prince began unexpectedly to talk about Princess Mary, blaming her for her superstitions and her dislike of Mademoiselle Bourrienne, who, he said, was the only person really attached to him.
The old prince said that if he was ill, it was only because of Princess Mary, that she purposely worried and irritated him, and that by indulgence and silly talk she was spoiling little Prince Nicholas. The old prince knew very well that he tormented his daughter and that her life was very hard, but he also knew that he could not help tormenting her and that she deserved it.
Sounds like a familiar bind.
It's tough. It's tough. What's one to do? Why does Prince Andrew, who sees this, say nothing to me about his sister? Does he think me a scoundrel or an old fool who, without any reason, keeps his own daughter at a distance and attaches this Frenchwoman to himself? He doesn't understand, so I must explain it, and he must hear me out, thought the old prince. And he began explaining why he could not put up with his daughter's unreasonable character.
If you ask me, said Prince Andrew without looking up, he was censuring his father for the first time in his life. Wow. I did not wish to speak about it, but as you ask me, I will give you my frank opinion. If there is any misunderstanding and discord between you and Mary, I can't blame her for it at all. I know how she loves and respects you, since you asked me, continued Prince Andrew, becoming irritable, as he was always liable to do of late. I can only say that if there are any misunderstandings, they are caused by that worthless woman who is not fit to be my sister's companion.
The old man at first stared fixedly at his son, and an unnatural smile disclosed the fresh gap between his teeth to which Prince Andrew could not get accustomed.
What companion, my dear boy? Eh? You've already been talking it over. Eh?
Father, I did not want to judge, said Prince Andrew in a hard and bitter tone. But you challenged me, and I have said and always shall say that Mary is not to blame. But those to blame, the one to blame, no, this is not right. But anyway, the one to blame is that French woman. The woman. Mm.
Ah, he has passed judgment, said the old man in a low voice, and, as it seemed to Prince Andrew, with some embarrassment. But then he suddenly jumped up and cried, Be off! Be off! Let not a trace of you remain here. Cool.
Prince Andrew wished to leave at once, but Princess Mary persuaded him to stay another day. That day he did not see his father, who did not leave his room, and admitted no one but Mademoiselle Bourienne and Ticken, but asked several times whether his son had gone. Next day, before leaving, Prince Andrew went to his son's room. Oh, yeah. I forgot.
You forgot he had a son again.
Yeah, I did. I was like, no, that can't be right. He's the son. The boy.
This poor kid's gonna be so fucked up.
God. The boy, curly-headed like his mother. I know, like Princess Mary is the only person who takes care of him.
And she's like,
oh, okay. The boy, curly-headed like his mother and glowing with health, sat on his knee, and Prince Andrew began telling him the story of Bluebeard.
What?
Whoa, that's a dark story for a child, okay? But fell into a reverie without finishing the story. He thought not of this pretty child, his son, whom he held on his knee, but of himself.
Narcissism, 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 narcissism.
He sought in himself either remorse for having angered his father or regret at leaving home for the first time in his life on bad terms with him, and was horrified to find neither. What meant still more to him was that he sought and did not find in himself the former tenderness for his son which he had hoped to realize. Prince Andrew, without replying, put him down from his knee and went out of the room.
Cool. As soon as Prince Andrew had given up his daily occupation, especially on returning to the old conditions of life amid which he had been happy, weariness of life overcame him with its former intensity, and he hastened to escape from these memories and to find some work as soon as possible.
So you've decided to go, Andrew? Asked his sister.
Thank God that I can, replied Prince Andrew. I am very sorry you can't.
Why do you say that? Replied Princess Mary. Why do you say that when you were going to this terrible war and he is so old? Mademoiselle Bourienne says he has been asking about you.
As soon as she began to speak of that, her lips trembled and her tears began to fall. Prince Andrew turned away and began pacing the room.
Oh, my God. When one thinks who and what trash can cause people misery, he said with a malignity that alarmed Princess Mary.
She understood that when speaking of trash, he referred not only to Mademoiselle Bourienne, the cause of her misery, but also to the man who had ruined his own happiness.
Andrew, one thing I beg, I entreat of you, she said, touching his elbow and looking at him with eyes that shone through her tears. I understand you, she looked down. Don't imagine that sorrow is the work of men. Men are his tools. She looked a little above Prince Andrew's head with the confident, accustomed look with which one looks at the place where a familiar portrait hangs. Sorrow is sent by him, not by men. Men are his instruments.
She's checking out his aura? What's happening?
She's like, sorrow is sent by him, not by men.
I can see your halo.
Men are his instruments, they are not to blame. If you think someone has wronged you, forget it and forgive. We have no right to punish, and then you will know the happiness of forgiving.
If I were a woman, I would do so, Mary. That is a woman's virtue. But a man should not and cannot forgive and forget. Cool, he replied. And though till that moment he had not been thinking of Kuragin, all his unexpended anger suddenly swelled up in his heart.
If Mary is already persuading me to forgive, it means that I ought long ago to have punished him, he thought. Okay. And giving her no further reply, he began thinking of the glad, vindictive moment when he would meet Kuragin, who he knew was now in the army.
Princess Mary begged him to stay one day more, saying that she knew how unhappy her father would be if Andrew left without being reconciled to him. But Prince Andrew replied that he would probably soon be back again from the army and would certainly write to his father, but that the longer he stayed now, the more embittered their differences would become.
Goodbye, Andrew. Remember that misfortunes come from God, and men are never to blame, were the last words he heard from his sister when he took leave of her.
Then it must be so, thought Prince Andrew as he drove out of the avenue from the house at Bald Hills. She, poor innocent creature, is left to be victimized by an old man who has outlived his wits. The old man feels he is guilty but cannot change himself. My boy is growing up and rejoices in life, in which, like everybody else, he will deceive or be deceived. And I am off to the army. Why? I myself don't know. I want to meet a man whom I despise so as to give me a chance to kill and laugh at me.
These conditions of life.
Dear God.
Wait, I'm gonna. Revenge. Revenge. See, that's like something I don't understand.
Yep.
It's not that I think I have that capacity, but I repress that. It's not conscious. I'm not like, yes, I will go.
Who is?
I'm assuming some people.
Clearly, because it keeps getting referred to like a thing that happens.
Yeah. These conditions of life had been the same before, but when they were all connected, well, now they had all tumbled to pieces. Only senseless things lacking coherence presented themselves one after another to Prince Andrew's mind. Why is he angry at his father too?
Just dick.
Yeah, but like, oh, now that he was mean to Prince Andrew, he's angry?
When was he mean to Prince Andrew?
He wasn't even mean. But like,
it's the French girl.
I just mean it's not, oh, it's the French girl.
No, like I think that's what pushed him over though.
Okay.
Andrew was like, "You've taken up with the parlor maid? I'll none of it." I don't know.
That's so weird. Where's her family? I don't understand this thing. Where she
The
just
what
lives
saga?
The Fern.
Listen. Has much happened in this saga? The Fern saga continues. What twists and turns have there been? Because it feels like it's been the exact same this whole time.
I think it's been the same.
So
should we just have a live stream of the Fern so people can watch
slowly
it?
dying?
Yeah. Or coming back to life.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
That's a possibility too.
Yeah.
Oh, I have such a difficult relationship with the indoor plants.
Yeah. I'm not good with plants.
I don't know if I am.
I'm just not a plant mama.
Well, you certainly are stepping up to the plate. I'll tell you that much. I'm being completely serious. I don't know
Are
why.
you?
Yes.
Oh,
I don't know
okay.
why
I
I'm
was
doing it in
like-
this weird voice.
No, I was thinking like, oh shit, it's been a few days since I watered them.
Oh, well, then I take it back.
Yeah, I think you should.
Now I'm being sarcastic.
Yeah.
Retrospectively. I mean, retroactively.
I'm gonna set an alarm in my phone. How about that?
That works well for you.
It does actually. Yeah, I had to turn off all those like move the car for street cleaning
I know.
alarms because they kept going off.
Really?
While I was trying to sleep at 10:30 in the morning.
I think that's an acceptable time to wake up now. I had to set an alarm to wake up for a class that was at 10.
Yeah.
And I was like, just made it in time. Better chug this coffee. Tell you that.
Mhm.
What's that third response say?
It says, I'm out. What? Trim out the brown. Oh.
There'll be nothing there. It'll be bald hills back
Yeah,
there.
maybe we should trim it. Maybe that's the problem.
I don't think this. Let's trim it. There literally will be 3 farms.
It'd be really funny.
It's gonna be like
Actually, if like next video is just wing.
that one's just got more chutzpah.
Yeah.
And light, I imagine.
Oh, yeah, I wonder what the light. I don't know. Okay. Where are we? We're chapter 9.
Mm-hmm.
Prince Andrew reached the general headquarters of the army at the end of June. The first army, with which was the emperor, occupied the fortified camp at Drissa. The second army was retreating, trying to effect a junction with the first one, from which it was said to be cut off by large French forces. Everyone was dissatisfied with the general course of affairs in the Russian army, but no one anticipated any danger of invasion of the Russian provinces, and no one thought the war would extend farther than the Polish provinces.
Prince Andrew found Barclay de Tolly, to whom he had been assigned on the bank of the Drissa. As there was not a single town or large village in the vicinity of the camp, the immense number of generals and courtiers accompanying the army were living in the best houses of the villages on both sides of the river, over a radius of 6 miles. Barclay de Tolly was quartered nearly... He's Russian?
Oh.
Is the Tolly person? Because that doesn't sound very Russian, but why is he...
He is Russian. Prince Michael Andreas Barclay de Tolly was a Baltic German field marshal and minister of war of the Russian Empire.
German. So, I don't know why I'm making his name sound so French.
What a moustache.
All the better to rip it out. Wow! That's the mustache of the century.
You can't see it. Can we...
That's a fucking... I have never been impressed by a mustache before,
Ooh.
ever in my life before today.
That's before all the fancy pomades.
Dang. Those are worthy of the name mustache. Barclay de Tolly was quartered nearly 3 miles from the emperor. He received Bolkonsky stiffly and coldly, and told him in his foreign accent that he would mention him to the emperor for a decision as to his employment, but asked him meanwhile to remain on his staff. Anatole Kuragin, whom Prince Andrew had hoped to find with the army, was not there. He had gone to Petersburg, but Prince Andrew was glad to hear this. His mind was occupied by the interests of the center that was conducting a gigantic war. What? By the interest of the center that was conducting a gigantic war, and he was glad to be free for a while from the distraction caused by the thought of Kuragin. During the first 4 days, while no duties were required of him, Prince Andrew rode around the whole fortified camp and, by the aid of his own knowledge and by talks with experts, tried to form a definite opinion about it. But the question whether the camp was advantageous or disadvantageous remained for him undecided. Already from his military experience and what he had seen in the Austrian campaign, he had come to the conclusion that in war, the most deeply considered plans have no significance, and that all depends on the way unexpected movements of the enemy that cannot be foreseen are met, and on how and by whom the whole matter is handled. To clear up this last point for himself, Prince Andrew, utilizing his position and acquaintances, tried to fathom the character of the control of the army. Character of the control of the army? The Rise of the Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, tried to fathom the character of the control of the army and of the men and parties engaged in it, and he deduced for himself the following of the state of affairs.
Did he not?
The hell type of sentence is that?
I don't know.
That was a bullshit.
The following of the state of affairs. While the emperor had still been at Vilna, the forces had been divided into 3 armies. First, the army under Barclay de Tolly. Secondly, the army under Bagration. And thirdly, the one commanded by Tormasov. The emperor was the first army, but not as commander-in-chief. In the orders issued, it was stated not that the emperor would take command, but only that he would be with the army. The emperor, moreover, had with him not a commander-in-chief's staff, but the imperial headquarters staff. In attendance on him was the head of the imperial staff, quartermaster General Prince Volkonsky.
What?
That's not confusing. As well as generals, imperial aide-de-camp, diplomatic officials, and a large number of foreigners, but not the army staff. Besides these, there were in attendance on the emperor without any definite appointments. Why do we need to know all this? Archiv, the ex-minister of war, Count Bennigsen,
saying that in this book.
the senior general in rank, the Grand Duke Tsarev Konstantin Pavlovich, Count Rumiantsev, the Chancellor Stein, a former Prussian minister, Armfeldt, a Swedish general.
Yes, but who else?
Fuel, the chief author of the plan of campaign, Palucci, an adjutant general and Sardinian emigre, Volzogin, and many others.
But who others?
Though these men had no military appointment in the army, their position gave them influence, and often a corps commander or even the commander-in-chief did not know in what capacity he was questioned by Bennigsen, the Grand Duke, Archiv, or Prince Volkonsky, or was given this or that advice and did not know whether a certain order received in the form of advice emanated from the man who gave it or from the emperor, and whether it had to be executed or not. But this was only the external condition. The essential significance of the presence of the emperor and of all these people, from a courtier's point of view, and in an emperor's vicinity all became courtiers, was clear to everyone. It was this. The emperor did not assume the title of commander-in-chief, but disposed of all the armies. The men around him were his assistants. Archie was a faithful...
What the devil is happening?
So Prince Andrew has sussed out the character of control of the Russian army.
Which is that certainly the emperor is not in control.
There's 3 armies, and we're describing the first one.
We're back to the first one?
We're still describing the first one.
All those people were in the first one?
Yes, because they're all with the emperor.
You're right.
Who is not commander-in-chief.
You're right.
So, and they're not actually in the army. They're just his entourage.
So who is the commander of this army?
So the command... wait, they said this. No, Barclay de Tolly.
So he's got the emperor in his camp.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. I hope that we get a comprehensive list of who is in the other 2 camps.
I hope as well.
Yeah.
It'd be a shame.
And there might even be a Kolkonsky or a Dolkonsky. You know who would be good? A Dolokonsky.
Yeah, that'd be great. Wonderful.
I'm actually the bathroom.
Oh, do you?
Yeah.
That's okay.
Okay.
I still have a whew.
But how am I gonna know what's happening?
That's true. I'll have to.
If I miss all this.
I don't know. I could wait.
No.
I could just talk to myself for a while. What else did I do today? I went for a drive to nowhere. And then realized I didn't have my driver's license. And then I got nervous and I drove home. And I made a smoothie. And I don't know what else I did. Did a face mask. I stayed in bed a lot. I did a dance class. Yeah, I know this is fascinating. Okay, I'm just going to read. It was this. The emperor did not assume the title of commander-in-chief, but disposed of all the armies. The men around him were his assistants. Erikchiv was a faithful custodian to enforce order and acted as the sovereign's bodyguard. Benningsen was a landlord in the Vilna province who appeared to be doing the honors of the district, but was in reality a good general, useful as an advisor and ready at hand to replace Barclay. The Grand Duke was there because it suited him to be. The ex-minister Stein was there because his advice was useful, and the Emperor Alexander held him in high esteem personally. Armfelt virulently hated Napoleon and was a general full of self-confidence, a quality that always influenced Alexander. Paolucci was there because he was bold and decided in speech. The adjutants general were there because they always accompanied the emperor, and lastly and chiefly, Fuel was there because he had drawn up the plan of campaign against Napoleon and, having induced Alexander to believe in the efficacy of that plan, was directing the whole business of the war. With Fuel was Volzogen, who expressed Fuel's thoughts in a more comprehensible way than Fuel himself, who was a harsh, bookish theorist, self-confident to the point of despising everyone else, was able to do.
So we just went through why the people.
Yeah, like what they're actually doing there. Yeah.
Are any of them doing anything?
Fuel is.
Fuel.
Fuel.
Fuel. It's a silent P.
Some of them
Or
are
maybe
just
not so
giving
silent.
advice.
Okay, cool. Besides these Russians and foreigners who propounded new and unexpected ideas every day, especially the foreigners who did so with a boldness characteristic of people employed in a country not their own, there were many secondary personages accompanying the army because their principles were there.
Among the opinions and voices in this immense, restless, brilliant, and proud sphere, Prince Andrew noticed the following sharply defined subdivisions of tendencies and parties.
Oh, thank goodness.
Wait, so now we get to find out all the people. Let's see.
Those were just like the phylum,
Yeah.
and we are now going into genus.
Full pyramid. Okay.
The first party consisted of Fuel and his adherents, military theorists who believed in a science of war with immutable laws of oblique movements, outflankings, and so forth. Fuel and his adherents, I don't know this word adherents, demanded a retirement into the depths of the country in accordance with precise laws defined by, so these are the Moneyball people, defined by a pseudo-theory of war, and they saw only barbarism, ignorance, or evil intention in every deviation from that theory. Oh, so they're like Moneyball, but also purists?
Yes.
Cool.
Yes.
To this party belonged the foreign nobles, Volzogen, Wintzingerode, and others, chiefly Germans.
Second party was directly opposed to the first. One extreme, as always happens, was met by representatives of the other. The members of this party were those who had demanded an advance from Vilna into Poland and freedom from all prearranged plans. Besides being advocates of bold action, this section also represented nationalism, which made them still more one-sided in the dispute. They were Russians: Bagration, Ermolov, who was beginning to come to the front, and others. At that time, a famous joke of Ermolov's was being circulated that, as a great favor, he had petitioned the emperor to make him a German. The men of... Joke. Do you get it?
It's famous.
The men of that party, remembering Suvorov, said that what one had to do was not to reason or stick pins into maps, but to fight, beat the enemy, keep him out of Russia, and not let the army get discouraged.
To the third party, in which the emperor had most confidence, belonged the courtiers who tried to arrange compromises between the others. Of this party, chiefly civilians, and to whom Arakchev belonged, thought and said what men who have no convictions but wish to seem to have some generally say. They said that undoubtedly war, particularly against such a genius as Bonaparte, they call him Bonaparte now, but presumably that's a pronunciation thing, needs most deeply devised plans and profound scientific knowledge, and in that respect, Fuel was a genius. But at the same time, it had to be acknowledged that the theorists are often one-sided, and therefore one should not trust them absolutely, but should also listen to what Fuel's opponents and practical men of experience in warfare had to say, and then choose a middle course. They insisted on the retention of the camp of Drissa according to Fuel's plan, but on changing the movements of the other armies. Though, by this course, neither one aim nor the other could be attained, yet it seemed best to the adherents of this third party.
Um,
Sounds stuck.
Sound like anything? Yeah. Of a fourth opinion, the most conspicuous representative was Savarich, who could not forget his disillusionment at Austerlitz, where he had ridden out at the head of the guards in his casque and cavalry uniform as to a review, respecting to crush the French gallantly, but unexpectedly finding himself in the front line had narrowly escaped amid the general confusion. The men of this party had both the quality and the defect of frankness in their opinions.
These are my people.
Yeah, they feared Napoleon, recognized his strength and their own weakness, and frankly said so. They said, nothing but sorrow, shame, and ruin will come of all this.
Oh, shit.
We have abandoned Vilna and Vitebsk and shall abandon Drissa. The only reasonable thing left to do is to conclude peace as soon as possible before we are turned out of Petersburg.
This view was very general in the upper army circles and found support also in Petersburg and from the Chancellor, Rumyantsev, who, for other reasons of state, was in favor of peace.
The fifth party, we got 6 pages to go from this chapter. I wonder if it keeps going like this.
I wonder if
the 13th party, the 20th party, just like to go to parties, and at those parties they would comment on the other parties they had been to and whether they were the same, and if they were, then there was a good party.
Ah, Berg. I miss Berg. What a good party he throws. Solid party.
Yeah. I know what his quarantine party would be like.
It would be exactly the same as this one. And that other one.
The fifth party consisted of those who were adherents of Barclay de Tolly, not so much as a man, but as Minister of War and Commander-in-Chief. Be he what he may, they always began like that. He is an honest, practical man, and we have nobody better. Give him real power, for war cannot be conducted successfully without unity of command. And he will show what he can do, as he did in Finland. If our army is well organized and strong and has withdrawn to Drissa without suffering any defeats, we owe this entirely to Barclay. If Barclay is now to be superseded by Bennigsen, all will be lost, for Bennigsen showed his incapacity already in 1807.
True. The sixth party, mother of pearl, the Bennigsenites, said, on the contrary, that at any rate there was no one more active and experienced than Bennigsen. And twist about as you may, you will have to come to Bennigsen eventually. Let the others make mistakes now, said they, arguing that our retirement to Drissa was a most shameful reverse and an unbroken series of blunders. The more mistakes that are made, the better. It will at any rate be understood all the sooner that things cannot go on like this. What is wanted is not some Barclay or other, but a man like Bennigsen, who made his mark in 1807, and to whom Napoleon himself did justice. A man whose authority would be willingly recognized, and Bennigsen is the only such man.
The seventh party,
oh my God,
consisted of the sort of people who are always to be found, especially around young sovereigns, and of whom there were particularly many round Alexander, generals and imperial aides-de-camp passionately devoted to the emperor, not merely as a monarch, but as a man, adoring him sincerely and disinterestedly, as Rostov had done in 1805, and who saw in him not, remember in 1805?
No. You mean Rostov's?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure which Rostov.
No, the Rostov who was besotted with the emperor.
Oh, we are still talking about. Okay. That's also weird that he mentions Rostov. Like
who?
Oh, are you talking to us, Tolstoy?
I don't know who he's talking to and who's talking, or who's talking.
Yeah, but like he would only bring up as in Rostov in 1805. Like if he's like, remember Raider?
Yeah, but like
how in the book when we did that?
How are we to remember anything about what's happening?
Anyway. And who saw in him not only all the virtues, but all human capabilities as well. These men, though enchanted with the sovereign for refusing the command of the army, yet blamed him for such excessive modesty, and only desired and insisted that their adored sovereign should abandon his diffidence, and openly announced that he would place himself at the head of the army, gather round him a commander-in-chief's staff, and consulting experienced theoreticians and practical men where necessary, would himself lead the troops, whose spirits would thereby be raised to the highest pitch.
The eighth and largest group, which in its enormous numbers was to the others as 99 to 1. Why didn't we just listen to this group and none of the others? God damn it. Consisted of men who desired neither peace nor war, neither an advance nor a defensive camp at the Drissa or anywhere else, neither Barclay nor the Emperor, neither fuel nor Bennigsen, but only the one most essential thing, as much advantage and pleasure for themselves as possible. In the troubled waters, I can't believe this, in the troubled waters of conflicting and intersecting increase, Nithya?
Yeah, increase.
In the troubled waters of conflicting and intersecting intrigues that eddied about the emperor's headquarters, it was possible to succeed in many ways unthinkable to at other times. A man who simply wished to retain his lucrative post would today agree with Fuel, tomorrow with his opponent, and the day after, merely to avoid responsibility or to please the emperor, would declare that he had no opinion at all on the matter. Another who wished to gain, this is depressing, who wished to gain some advantage, would attract the emperor's attention by loudly advocating the very thing the emperor had hinted at the day before, and would dispute and shout at the council, beating his breast and challenging those who did not agree with him to duels, thereby proving that he was prepared to sacrifice himself for the common good. A third, in the absence of opponents, between two councils, would simply solicit a special gratuity for his faithful services, well knowing that at that moment people would be too busy to refuse him. A fourth, while seemingly overwhelmed with work, would often come accidentally under the emperor's eye. A fifth, to achieve his long-cherished aim of dining with the emperor, good lord, would stubbornly insist on the correctness or falsity of some newly emerging opinion, and for this object would produce arguments more or less forcible and correct.
All the men of this party were fishing for rubles, decorations, and promotions, and in this pursuit watched only the weathercock of imperial favor. Ah, yes, that weathercock of imperial.
This is everybody in the book is in this group.
Yeah.
The exception of Pierre. Almost every character in the book is in this big fugly camp.
Definitely. Just looking out for number one. And directly they noticed it turning in any direction. This whole drone population of the army began blowing hard that way, so that it was all the harder for the emperor to turn it elsewhere. Amid the uncertainties of the position, with the menace of serious danger giving peculiarly threatening,
Reading is difficult.
Peculiarly? How would you?
Peculiarly.
Peculiarly. Peculiarly threatening character to everything.
Peculiarly. That would be hard to say.
Peculiarly. Amid this vortex of intrigue, egotism, conflict of views and feelings, and the diversity of race among these people, this eighth and largest party of those preoccupied with personal interests imparted great confusion and obscurity to the common task.
No kidding.
It would, yes. Whatever question arose, a swarm of these drones, without having finished their buzzing on a previous theme, flew over to the new one, and by their hum drowned and obscured the voices of those who were disputing honestly.
From among all these parties, just at the time Prince Andrew reached the army, a ninth party was, thank God, being formed, and was beginning to raise its voice.
Huh?
This was the party of the elders,
Oh.
reasonable men, experienced and capable in state affairs, who, without sharing any of those conflicting opinions, were able to take a detached view of what was going on at the staff, at headquarters, and to consider means of escape from this muddle, indecision, intricacy, and weakness.
The men of this party said and thought that what was wrong resulted chiefly from the emperor's presence in the army with his military court, and from the consequent presence there of an indefinite, conditional, and unsteady fluctuation of relations, which is in place at court but harmful in an army. That a sovereign should reign but not command the army, and that the only way out of the position would be for the emperor and his court to leave the army. that the mere presence of the emperor paralyzed the action of 50,000 men required to secure his personal safety, and that the worst commander-in-chief, if independent, would be better than the very best one trammeled by the presence and authority of the monarch.
Just at the time Prince Andrew was living unoccupied at Drissa, Shishkov, the Secretary of State and one of the chief representatives of this party, wrote a letter to the emperor which Arakchev and Balashev agreed to sign. In this letter, availing himself of permission given him by the emperor to discuss the general course of affairs, he respectfully suggested, on the plea that it was necessary for the sovereign to arouse a warlike spirit in the people of the capital, that the emperor should leave the army.
That arousing of the people by their sovereign and his call to them to defend their country, the very incitement which was the chief cause of Russia's triumph insofar as it was produced by the Tsar's personal presence in Moscow, was suggested to the emperor and accepted by him as a pretext for quitting the army.
Cool. So he's gonna leave. And what about all the fucking people who we just went through who were their hangers on?
Yeah, we worried about them so that they could go away. I'm assuming they're gonna leave as well. Cool.
Book 9 is the most annoying book so far.
Right? I'm like, this.
What are we doing? What are we doing? Chapter 10. We've read 9 chapters of book 9.
Yeah.
And what's happened? Andrew went home for a second.
Andrew went home for a second, that's true. Napoleon will not retreat. So the war has begun. And we're just getting a lay of the land about all these armies. It's going really well so far.
Is it?
Yeah, like the Russians are obviously super organized. Well done, guys. Yeah.
Although everything that basically is said in any of this about all these conflicting opinions is exactly what it seemed like was going on from the beginning.
Yeah, it was like
the mismanagement and you know what I mean?
Yeah, but thanks for telling us, Tolstoy.
After telling, like
after
all
I
burned
time.
the fucking calories to figure it out.
Yeah.
Thank you for laying it out.
Yeah. Well, maybe it's like the first time. No, it's not the first time Andrew's noticed us. Were we supposed to take that all in from Andrew's point of view? That's what I thought. I thought he's like, yes, I have the lay of the land.
He was divining all of these structures, but they exist independent of him. That's what I thought.
Yeah, what party is Andrew in? Man. Andrew's in his own party.
Andrew doesn't go to parties.
He does. Yeah. We've seen him at a party or two.
I just mean like he doesn't go to parties.
I know. No, I was being like really literal. Anyway. He does.
I like it when people are overly literal. It's fun.
Are you up to keep reading one more chapter?
I mean, it is my hope that something will happen.
I think something's going to happen. I have a good feeling about chapter 10.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's mother love and do it then.
Okay. Chapter 10. This letter had not yet been presented to the emperor when Barclay, one day at dinner, informed Bolkonsky that the sovereign wished to see him personally, to question him about Turkey, and that Prince Andrew was to present himself at Benningsen's quarters at 6 that evening.
News was received at the emperor's quarters that very day of a fresh movement by Napoleon which might endanger the army. News subsequently found to be false. And that morning, Colonel Michaud had ridden round the Drissa fortifications with the emperor and had pointed out to him that this fortified camp, constructed by Pfuel, until then considered a chef d'oeuvre of tactical science,
Chef d'oeuvre.
An egg cooker? An egg... Oh no.
Wait, what?
I confused oeuvre with oeuf.
An egg cooker.
Also, I have eggs on the brain because of the gosling. An egg cooker. Yes, Nithya, oeuvre means egg.
Such a chef d'oeuvre.
I'm a chef d'oeuvre. That's literally all I do is Earths.
Mhm.
Okay. Until Dickinson, a chef d'oeuvre of tactical science, which would ensure Napoleon's destruction, was an absurdity threatening the destruction of the Russian army.
Prince Andrew arrived at Benningsen's quarters, a country gentleman's house of moderate size situated on the very banks of the river.
These poor unfortunate souls,
I know, they're suffering.
the villagers.
Oh.
They're like, okay, I guess this is Benningsen's house now.
Yeah. How does he get his house? Out.
On the citizenship test, it said that one of the main reasons that the Americans, the colonists, were like, the hell with this,
Mhm.
the hell with England, we're doing our own thing, was because they were freaking annoyed with having to house the British soldiers.
Really?
Yes. I thought that was the weirdest
It is like,
justification.
they're rude house guests.
Yeah, it's like they're overstaying their welcome.
Ugh.
Can you believe that that's one of the reasons
I can't
that they
actually.
list?
I can.
It was like liberty, freedom, plus the annoying soldiers need to go away. Like there were all these like high-minded things. Taxation without representation, and
Yeah, because I always think it's those base like little irritations.
then that are just like too much.
No, I cannot handle this anymore.
Yeah.
Keeps eating all the sugar or whatever it is. I
So
don't know.
good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Where are we?
Prince Andrew.
Prince
arrived in-
Andrew? Yeah. Prince Andrew arrived at Benningsen's quarters, a country gentleman's house of moderate size situated on the very banks of the river. Neither Benningsen nor the emperor was there, but Chernyshev, the emperor's aide-de-camp, received Bolkonsky and informed him that the emperor, accompanied by General Benningsen and Marquis Palucci, had gone a second time that day to inspect the fortifications of the Drissa camp, of the suitability of which serious doubts were beginning to be felt.
Chernyshev was sitting at a window in the first room with a French novel in his hand. This room had probably been a music room. There was still an organ in it, on which some rugs were piled, and in one corner stood the folding bedstead of Benningsen's adjutant. This adjutant was also there and sat dozing on the rolled-up bedding, evidently exhausted by work or by feasting. Two doors led from the room, one straight on into what had been the drawing room, and another on the right to the study. Through the first door came the sound of voices conversing in German and occasionally in French. In that drawing room were gathered, by the emperor's wish, not a military council, the emperor preferred indefiniteness, but certain persons whose opinions he wished to know in view of the impending difficulties. It was not a council of war, but, as it were, a council to elucidate certain questions for the emperor personally. To this semi-council had been invited the Swedish General Armfelt, Adjutant General Voltzogen, Vincengerode, whom Napoleon had referred to as a renegade French subject, Michaud, Toll, Count Stein, who was not a military man at all, and Pfuel himself, who, as Prince Andrew had heard, was the mainspring of the whole affair. Prince Andrew had an opportunity of getting a good look at him, for Pfuel arrived soon after himself and, in passing through to the drawing room, stopped a minute to speak to Chernyshev.
At first sight, Pfuel, in his ill-made uniform of a Russian general, which fitted him badly like a fancy costume, seemed familiar to Prince Andrew, though he saw him now for the first time. There was about him something of Weyrother, Mack, and Schmidt, and many other German theorist generals whom Prince Andrew had seen in 1805, but he was more typical than any of them. Prince Andrew had never seen a German theorist in whom all the characteristics of those others were united to such an extent.
Pfuel was short and very thin, but broad-boned. Of course, robust build, broad in the hips, and with prominent shoulder blades.
I have such a hard time picturing this. He's very thin, but broad-boned. What does that mean?
I have no idea, but one of the first things you notice about him is shoulder blades.
So, okay. But they're large shoulder blades.
They're in the back. How can that be a defining... Okay.
Robust build, though. He's thin but robust.
Very thin, it says.
Yeah, right. Very. I don't know what this is. And he's also short. Do not forget the shortness.
And broad. He's thin and broad. I guess when he turns to the side, he just kind of disappears. His face was much wrinkled and his eyes deep set. His hair had evidently been hastily brushed smooth in front of the temples, but stuck up behind in quaint little tufts.
Oh,
He entered the room.
he kind of looks like what I think.
He entered the room looking restlessly and angrily around, as if afraid of everything in that large apartment. Awkwardly holding up his sword, he addressed Chernishev and asked in German where the emperor was. One could see that he wished to pass through the rooms as quickly as possible, finish with the bows and greetings, and sit down to business in front of a map where he would feel at home. He nodded hurriedly in reply to Chernishev and smiled ironically on hearing that the sovereign was inspecting the fortifications that he, Fuel, had planned in accord with his theory. He muttered something to himself abruptly and in a bass voice, as self-assured Germans do. It might have been "stupid fellow," or "the whole affair will be ruined," or "something absurd will come of it." Prince Andrew did not catch what he said and would have passed on, but Chernishev introduced him to Fuel, remarking that Prince Andrew was just back from Turkey, where the war had terminated so fortunately. Fuel barely glanced, not as much at Prince Andrew as past him, and said, with a laugh, "That must have been a fine tactical war," and laughing contemptuously, went on into the room from which the sound of voices was heard.
Fuel, always inclined to be irritably sarcastic, was particularly disturbed that day, evidently by the fact that they had dared to inspect and criticize his camp in his absence. From this short interview with Fuel, Prince Andrew, thanks to his Austerlitz experiences, was able to form a clear conception of the man. Fuel was one of those hopelessly and immutably self-confident men, self-confident to the point of martyrdom, as only Germans are, because only Germans are self-confident on the basis of an abstract notion. Science, that is, the supposed knowledge of absolute truth.
That might be my favorite sentence in the whole book.
Really?
Yes, it's insane.
A Frenchman is... Wait, do you want to extrapolate?
Why it's hilarious?
Yeah.
First of all, to be self-confident to the point of martyrdom is already funny.
Yeah.
And then he's like, only Germans can do it.
Only Germans.
Because
Yeah,
only
well,
Germans are self-confident on the basis of an abstract notion, and his abstract notion that he's referring to is science.
Yeah.
The least abstract of all notions in our day and age. But then he also calls science the supposed knowledge of absolute truth, which I'm kind of in love with.
The supposed knowledge of absolute truth.
What an abstract. Science is basically art. That's kind of what he's saying. That's so fucking awesome. And funny.
A Frenchman is self-assured because he regards himself personally, both in mind and body, as irresistibly attractive to men and women.
What?
Don't you know? That's where Frenchmen get their confidence. End of story. An Englishman is self-assured as being a citizen of the best organized state in the world, and therefore, as an Englishman, always knows what he should do and knows that all he does as an Englishman is undoubtedly correct.
This is very funny.
An Italian is self-assured because he is excitable and easily forgets himself and other people. I don't know why that would make you self-assured, but sure. A Russian is self-assured just because he knows nothing, and he does not want to know anything, since he does not believe that anything can be known.
Oh, how annoying.
The German self-assurance is worst of all.
Surprise, surprise.
Strong.
He's always ragging on the
we
Germans.
hate Germans in this book, apparently. The German self-assurance is worst of all, stronger and more repulsive than any other, because he imagines that he knows the truth, science, which he himself has invented, but which is for him the absolute truth.
I'm secretly in love with that. Fuel was evidently of that sort. He had a science, the theory of oblique movements, deduced by him from the history of Frederick the Great's wars, and all he came across in the history of more recent warfare seemed to him absurd and barbarous, monstrous collisions in which so many blunders were committed by both sides that these wars could not be called wars. They did not accord with the theory, and therefore could not serve as material for science.
In
Oh my God, that's
1806,
really funny.
In 1806, Fuel had been one of those responsible for the plan of campaign that ended in Jena and Austerstadt, but he did not see the least proof of the fallibility of his theory in the disasters of that war. On the contrary, the deviations made from his theory were, in his opinion, the sole cause of the whole disaster, and with characteristically gleeful sarcasm, he would remark, "There, I said the whole affair would go to the devil." Fuel was one, oh, he talks about the devil, though, if he's so scientific. Anyway. Fuel was one of those theoreticians who so loved their theory that they lose sight of the theory's object, its practical application. His love of theory made him hate everything practical, and he would not listen to it. He was even pleased by failures, for failures resulting from deviations in practice from the theory only proved to him the accuracy of his
Oh
theory.
my god. He said a few words to Prince Andrew and Chernyshев about the present war with the air of a man who knows beforehand that all will go wrong and who is not displeased that it should be so. The unbrushed tufts of hair sticking up behind and the hastily brushed hair on his temples expressed this most eloquently.
He passed into the next room, and the deep querulous sounds of his voice were at once heard from there.
Whoa. Well, that was a crumb to me.
It was okay.
I'm in slightly better humor than I was before the
That's good.
end of that chapter.
It's not like anything happened, but
No, certainly nothing happened.
I mean, I've learned basically all I need to know about Europeans. End of story. Great, we're done.
I sort of feel like he's at his best when he's making like outrageous statements. I don't know, there's something that's very fitting. There's something very fitting about, yeah, I think that might be my favorite thing about his writing. Is those moments when he's like, here's what this is. But it's like, there's obviously a lot of humor to it.
Yeah.
And there's a lightness that, yeah, those are, I think, my favorite moments.
The Russians are self-assured because they know nothing and don't want to know anything. And they know. What is it? And they don't want to know anything. And they know it or something.
Oh, because nothing can be known.
Nothing can be known, right?
Great. Which is kind of like what he goes on saying himself. He's like, we can never know the reasons for the war.
Yeah. Who are we to try?
Yeah.
Maybe that's why everything's such a mystery.
Yeah.
Maybe, because he's like, I don't know, it just happened.
What a bizarre position to be writing a novel from, but yeah, I could see that. And it leaves you with this feeling of, wait, what? But according to him, or like from his point of view, you don't ever ask that, really.
Yeah.
You're like,
I can kind of see that. I can kind of see like how that's tied in with like the classic. I think of Russians as being very tragic. Actually, this has kind of changed that, but maybe it's more coming from that place of like, it's not like shit happens, but it's like
we're like destitute in the sea of fate.
Yeah, pretty much.
That makes sense. It'll play out as tragic quite often, I think.
Yeah.
Well then.
Well, thank y'all.
Questions, comments? No.
Aaron is here.
Is he?
Thanks for stopping by, Aaron.
Thanks, buddy. Because of the phone thing?
Mm-hmm.
That's why you said Aaron's here?
Yeah, he might be gone
He
now.
might be gone.
We should quiz him. I'm actually curious if people who have been watching this can like know what's going on and whether they're enjoying it.
It's my dear hope that someone somewhere is tracking the
My-
story, but I don't.
Yeah. My only hope is that like someone somewhere listens to some of this so that they can drop some quote at a dinner party someday.
Yes,
and
that
then
is
be
the higher
like,
hope.
then be like, yeah, I read War and Peace. Yes. Then I've done my due diligence.
Agree.
You'd be like, what a Prince Bolkonsky. Even if you're just able to do that,
Yeah.
I'll be so happy.
Meanwhile, you probably could have done that after seeing Natasha Pierre and The Great Khan Da Vinci Fall, but
Okay.
okay.
Good night. Good night.